Do you have a moment? It's about your mother-in-law. The doctor, who had pulled on my arm, looked at me with a deeply concerned expression. It's been 10 years since my mother-in-law became wheelchair-bound, and she has regularly been going to the hospital for checkups and physical therapy. That day, my mother-in-law's at the hospital for the same reason, undergoing tests. I was waiting for my mother-in-law in the waiting room before her therapy session when this doctor grabbed my arm. I'm gonna speak with her primary doctor about this. I gently released my arm from the doctor's grip. The doctor standing in front of me was a man, but my mother-in-law's primary was a woman. I didn't heard of any change in her primary care doctor. I was puzzled as to why a doctor who wasn't her primary would want to talk about my mother-in-law. Seeing the suspicion in my eyes, the male doctor hastily grabbed my hands. There's something neither your mother-in-law nor her primary doctor should hear. That's why I only want to tell you. Huh? Only me? I took a step towards the doctor, who was looking at me with a grave expression. My name is Julie. I'm a 37-year-old office worker. I work at a small and medium-sized company, but for some reason, I've been working remotely lately. When I was a child, my mother left home, and I was raised in a single-parent family. My father was always like, your mother was a no-good woman who ran off with a younger man. He advised me to never meet her. All I heard was that her name was Yvonne and she was a spendthrift, treating me like a nuisance and my father like a slave. My parents eventually divorced, and thanks to my father working day and night, I was able to go to college and find a job, albeit not at a big firm. Even though I didn't have a mother, I never felt lonely because of all the love my father gave me. After starting work, I've lived alone and become independent. 14 years ago, I married Mike. Mike's father had passed away 2 years before our wedding, and his mother, who was living alone, warmly welcomed me into their family, treating me like her own daughter. For years into our marriage, my mother-in-law was involved in a car accident and became wheelchair-bound. My mother-in-law used to be a lively and cheerful woman, but since the accident, her smiles have disappeared, and she's become very withdrawn. It must be hard for her to accept limited mobility. Though she had various caregivers over the years, it seemed none of them were a good match, and she seemed to deteriorate. She kept contacting us, saying she felt lonely and wanted us to come back, even if it was for a short while. Concerned, we decided to move back into his family home to take care of her. We decided to take a week off using our paid time off to dedicate to her care, and then return to our jobs once she was feeling better. My mother-in-law seemed relieved when my husband and I came to visit. After a few days, she began to smile again. But when we told her that we needed to get back to work, her demeanor changed completely. She didn't let us go. She was like, no. Please, both of you, don't leave. Don't leave me alone, crying out, nearly hysterical. Trying to calm her, I was like, look. Mike really needs to get back to his job, but I'll talk to my company and see if I can stay here a bit longer. I'll come back as often as I can. Just hang in there for me. Julie, if you can stay, that'd be great. Mike, you better come back, okay? I'll be waiting. After the loss of her husband, my mother-in-law had been alone for a long time. When we, as a couple, came to visit, she was overjoyed. But our sudden notification of leaving her likely brought on feelings of anxiety and confusion. I guessed her weakened state over the past week made her more fearful of facing her loneliness. After discussing with my company, I decided to switch to remote work and work for a short time from home until my mother-in-law calmed down while taking care of her. But ever since then, she despised being alone. Even when I worked from home, she'd always be clinging to me. No matter how close we might be, I couldn't let her be seen by my coworkers. Even if I asked her to leave the room, she'd always be waiting somewhere she could see me. It felt like I was being watched, and I began to resent it. Mike, on the other hand, would come home on weekends and even take some days off during the week to help with her care. Although she continued physical therapy, there was no improvement in her condition, which meant I couldn't return to the office. Our personal lives were dominated by her care, leaving no time for just the two of us. This year marks the 10th year of this lifestyle. She turned 65. With each passing year, her dependency on us grew. My husband, unable to bear it, reduced his visits year by year. Even if I stepped out for just a few minutes, my mother-in-law would freak out, yelling, and she was like, "Take me with you." Calming her down took ages, and I couldn't go back to our own home. But I couldn't abandon the woman who had welcomed me, from a single-parent household, without any judgment or prejudice. Then, one day, everything changed. On this day, my mother-in-law had a routine checkup. As always, I accompanied her to the hospital. My mother-in-law's doctor was a woman in her 30s named Mia. She had been taking care of my mother-in-law for 10 years, and I trusted her completely. After my mother-in-law went into the examination room, I stepped outside to take a work call. When I returned about 15 minutes later, a young male doctor stopped me. "Excuse me, you're Sally's daughter, right?" Sally is my mother-in-law's first name. The doctor who called out using my mother-in-law's name was a male doctor a bit younger than me. It was Ryan, and he recently transferred to this hospital. He mentioned that he's worked in the same department as Dr. Mia, who has been in charge of my mother-in-law. Taken aback, I was like, "Yes, actually I'm her daughter-in-law." "But what's going on?" "Well, I'm sorry for the sudden approach. Do you have a moment? I need to discuss something about your mother-in-law." "Regarding my mother-in-law?" "Sure, what's up?" I figured my mother-in-law's appointment probably wasn't over yet, so I agreed. Then, Dr. Ryan looked a bit relieved and led me to a small private room. It was a consultation room, not too far from the examination rooms. Dr. Ryan motioned for me to sit in a chair on the side, and once I settled in, he took a seat across a small desk, looking directly into my eyes. "You're currently living with Sally at her house to take care of her, right?" Oh, yes, that's right." I explained that for the past 10 years, I'd been working from my mother-in-law's home while caring for her. I hardly had time to hang out with friends, let alone have some alone time with my husband. Because of my mother-in-law's increased dependency, my husband started avoiding coming home. I lost almost all of my personal time, so I couldn't really discuss the care of my mother-in-law with anyone else. Dr. Ryan nodded, listening intently, which made me spill all the frustrations I'd been feeling. "Oh, I'm so sorry for going on and on like this." He was like, "It's completely all right. Anyway, wow, 10 years. He said that with a gentle smile, and then his face grew thoughtful. Moments later, Dr. Ryan looked at me with a serious expression. He started talking. However, what reached my ears wasn't Dr. Ryan's words, but a scream from my mother-in-law. In a panic, both Dr. Ryan and I rushed to the examination room where my mother-in-law was, and what we saw was unthinkable. I was at a loss for words. Dr. Ryan shook his head and he was like, "You should leave that house ASAP. Get away from your mother-in-law." His words left me speechless. Suppressing the anger that welled up inside me, I nodded to Dr. Ryan. I didn't go to my mother-in-law but headed straight to the police. Though skeptical they'd listen, they promised to send someone to investigate, so I hurriedly packed up my things from the house. The image of what I'd seen at the hospital kept replaying in my mind. An hour or so later, as I was still packing, I called my husband to explain everything. Throughout, I kept receiving countless calls and messages from my mother-in-law. She must have been worried since I didn't show up even after her treatments. But I continued to ignore her non-stop calls and messages until I mostly finished packing. In the evening, my husband and the police arrived, and that's when I finally answered a call from my mother-in-law.
"Julie, where are you? I've called so many times. Why aren't you picking up?"
As soon as the call connected, my mother-in-law yelled with fury. Normally, I'd apologize immediately, but this time with a firm attitude, I was like, "I'm at home.
"Why did you leave me behind and go home first? How could you do that?"
My mother-in-law continued to rant and rave. Sighing, I was like, "Hey, I realized I don't need to live with you anymore, so I'm going back to the house where my husband is." I told my mother-in-law firmly.
Well, Julie, what on earth are you thinking? How do you expect me to live without you? How am I supposed to get back from the hospital?
You probably know best, right? Why don't you just walk back home? After all, your legs are fine. So, you don't need a wheelchair or care, right? When I continued like that, my mother-in-law let out a short scream. I could picture her being extremely upset.
You know I found out everything you've been hiding.
I then relayed to my mother-in-law what Dr. Ryan had told me and what I had personally witnessed. According to Dr. Ryan, recent tests showed that there were no issues with the muscles or nerves in my mother-in-law's body. That's when he thought it might be all in her head. He thought that maybe my mother-in-law genuinely believed she couldn't walk, and that belief was what was actually preventing her from walking. Apparently, the power of such beliefs can be incredibly strong, and he was considering not only physical therapy for her legs but also psychological care. That's why he thought to include me, as family, in the care plan and had called me over. But, it turned out, even that wasn't necessary. While I was speaking with Dr. Ryan, I heard a woman scream from the examination room.
Was that my mother-in-law?
Dr. Ryan and I exchanged glances and quickly went to check the room. The exam room door had a window, and through it, we saw my mother-in-law making gestures as if swatting away an insect. Indeed, the scream had been my mother-in-law's. But why would there be a bug in the exam room? As it turned out, my mother-in-law had mistaken dust for a bug. We saw her picking up the motionless dust and walking over to the trash can to throw it away. Incredibly, my mother-in-law walked without the need for a wheelchair or cane, moving with light steps. I stared in shock as Dr. Ryan pushed me to the corner of the hallway. Peeking into the examination room, we noticed that my mother-in-law didn't seem to be aware of us. She calmly returned to her wheelchair as if nothing had happened. Just then, Dr. Mia came back into the room and slowly extended her hand to my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, seemingly in response, placed a brown envelope in her hand. Dr. Mia discreetly slipped the envelope into her skirt pocket and, acting as if nothing unusual had transpired, pushed my mother-in-law's wheelchair towards the facility for physical therapy.
Julie, are you okay?
I was so stunned by the series of events that I could only stand frozen until Dr. Ryan spoke softly to me. It wasn't that she couldn't walk or even that she believed she couldn't. She was pretending to be immobile. Trembling, I felt Dr. Ryan's hand on my shoulder, shaking his head gently. He advised me to leave my in-laws' house immediately, and I quickly packed to escape from my mother-in-law. Throughout my story, my mother-in-law remained silent. Finally, with a sigh audible over the phone, she began to speak, perhaps realizing she couldn't evade the truth any longer. It's true that I became wheelchair-bound after a car accident. And it's true I was injured seriously enough to need care. But thanks to the treatments, about 5 years after the accident, I could walk with the aid of a cane. My husband and I, listening over the speaker, were stunned. To think she had recovered in just 5 years. What then was the purpose of the 12 years we had spent caring for her? She was like I feared that once you both found out I could walk, you'd leave my side, Julie, Mike. I couldn't bear that thought. We knew she loved us dearly from her day-to-day attitude. She had us take care of her to ensure we wouldn't leave. Julie, I truly love you like my own daughter. After Mike moved out and my husband passed away, I felt so lonely. My mother-in-law repeatedly told us, but our hearts remained unmoved. We knew that, Mom. Mike. But the way you went about it was wrong. We can't be by your side any longer. Sorry.
Look, I've been taking care of you for the past 10 years while working. My colleagues have experienced promotions, marriages, and childbirth. Because of your care, I couldn't have a child of my own. I had almost given up on having kids. But now, I feel like the past 10 years are in vain. Why did you deceive us to the point of having us care for you? We would have visited you during our time off. Why did it have to be this way?
I didn't mean to blame her, but as the words poured out, so did my tears. With my husband supporting me, I told my mother-in-law that I didn't intend to care for her anymore. We would leave her house today and never contact her again. My mother-in-law protested and grew hysterical, but we hung up. The police, after understanding the details, said they'd begin an investigation. 2 months later. After moving, I was at a hospital with my husband. When we were about to leave after finishing our doctor's appointment, a familiar person rushed over to us. It was Dr. Mia, who was supposed to be my mother-in-law's doctor. We remembered her with fuller cheeks, but she looked gaunt, and fatigue emanated from her entire being. Wondering why she was at this hospital, we couldn't decline her as she approached with a desperate look, so we reluctantly listened to what she had to say. Turns out, Dr. Mia knew all along that my mother-in-law's leg was healed, and she had accepted money from her to give her a disability diagnosis. She mentioned the money was also in the envelope she received from my mother-in-law that day. Apparently, due to a complaint by Dr. Ryan recently, the hospital found out, and she was fired immediately. Furthermore, since she had continuously forged medical certificates, she's likely going to be arrested for fabricating medical records, and it's almost certain that her medical license will be revoked. But she insisted that she didn't do anything wrong. Incredibly, Dr. Mia claimed that the money wasn't an appreciation gift from my mother-in-law, but hush money from my husband and me. She alleged we plotted to scam disability pension by making my mother-in-law disabled, and she had written the necessary documents reluctantly after we threatened her and paid her off, but there was no evidence of any of this. It was Dr. Mia who extended her hand to my mother-in-law that day. I couldn't believe that she put all the blame on us just because she was in trouble, about to be arrested.
What are you talking about? We haven't done anything like that. No. That's the truth. I'm gonna tell the police everything.
Dr. Mia, her eyes red with rage, shouted, making us turn pale. While her claims had no evidence, it would also be tough for us to prove we had nothing to do with her. Terrified at the thought of being demanded to prove our innocence, a devil's proof, my husband and I were on the verge of tears when a woman approached us. She stood between Dr. Mia and us, shielding us. Aren't you the head doctor here? I urgently need to talk to you. Upon seeing the woman, Dr. Mia turned deathly pale. She quickly put on a forced smile, approached buttering up the woman, who was glaring at her. Do you need something from my daughter? Daughter? The woman, glaring at Dr. Mia, was the head doctor of this hospital, and she was Yvonne, my mother. Yes, my mother, whom I was separated from as a child due to her divorce, was a doctor. After divorcing my father, she quickly rose through the ranks and has been the head of a major university hospital. She was also one of the people who agreed with revoking Dr. Mia's medical license when she found out about her misdeeds.
Oh, you're related. In that case, could you please just hear me out? I was only threatened by them and wrote the diagnosis reluctantly. As a mother, you wouldn't want your daughter to be a criminal, right? Can't you help me out?
Dr. Mia begged, trying to invoke my mother's sympathy right then and there, but my mother shook her head. My mother was like, don't mess with me. You and Sally have been deceiving the hospital and the authorities for 10 years, keeping my daughters confined at home. Sally kept them at home because she was afraid to be alone. You, on the other hand, funded your debts from your nightlife with Sally's disability benefits. You frauds. You need to face appropriate punishment and make amends. Dr. Mia's plea was abruptly dismissed.
No way, absolutely not.
Dr. Mia, realizing there was nothing she could do, slumped to the ground in despair. Whispers and stares from those around us focused on her, and we couldn't help but watch with indescribable feelings. Suddenly, a strong pull came from behind. I was startled and turned around to find, astonishingly, my mother-in-law standing firmly beside my father.
You! What have you done to Julie?
My father, shouting angrily at my mother.
Dad, why are you here? And why with my mother-in-law?
When I heard that Sally was looking for Julie, I wanted to help. You moved to a place without telling me. I thought I would meet you if I followed Dr. Mia. The reason I hadn't told my father our whereabouts was not just because of the family connection between my mother-in-law and him. Ever since my mother-in-law had a car accident, I had asked my father to look after her when I was out for work. It was during those times that they became close and started dating secretly, behind the backs of both of us. I had found out about this last year when I happened to see my father and my mother-in-law talking closely at my in-laws' house on a few occasions after returning from an outing. I suspected their relationship and hence didn't inform my father when we moved. The very sight of them together now sent shivers down my spine.
Give Julie back. I won't let you take her away. Julie, Mike, let's go home.
My father, yelling at my mother, had an intensity I'd never seen before.
Brushing off my father's grip, I was like, stop it. I know all the stories you told me about Mom are lies.
My father's face went pale at my shout. Turned out, since the divorce, he had been feeding me lies about my mother to make sure I didn't want to meet her. The stories about her treating him like a slave or leaving him for a younger man were all false. My mother, an accomplished doctor, always had a busy schedule. My father knew this when they married. But after I started daycare, his attitude shifted drastically. He blamed her for our lack of family vacations and decided to divorce her, claiming she wasn't a good mother. And my father suddenly took me and left home on my 4th birthday. In reality, it was my father who left, not my mother. Following the divorce settlement, even though my mother had a decent income, she couldn't guarantee time for raising me. So, my father was nominated to live with me. However, my mother had been sending a substantial amount in child support every month. I didn't know until I met my mother. Even after becoming a single parent, my father made sure I didn't want to see my mother by portraying her in a negative light with false stories. It seemed that my mother wanted to see me, but most of time she was overseas for trainings or researches. Even she kept sending me letters to me from overseas, but my father kept refusing, hiding the letters. There were times when it seemed they might meet, but something always came up. Either my mother got an emergency call at the hospital or my father would come up with an excuse to cancel at the last minute. I had been told since I was young that my mother couldn't be reached, or that no one knew where she was. Turned out, that was a lie. The reason my father could afford to travel once every 2 months and pay for my high school and college tuition was thanks to the child support money from my mother. Our comfortable life was all thanks to my mother. So, the story of my father working late nights was also a sham. To make it seem like he was struggling with parenting, he'd work a regular 9-to-5 job, then spend night in somewhere, coming home only in early morning. When my father yelled and he was like, "Where's your proof?" my mother calmly showed him a mobile bank app. She was like, "This is how much I've transferred to you over the years for Julie, and your company unusually has strict policies against second jobs, so it was impossible. I can confirm with them if you'd like." My father crumbled, and my mother-in-law tried to comfort him. Seeing my father like this made me realize that I had been lied to my entire life. While the truth was shocking, I felt more anger than anything else. I was like, "Thanks for everything, Dad. But it's time to say goodbye," saying that coldly. My father clung to me, and my mother-in-law was like, "Julie, your dad did everything he thought was best for you." No, he did it for himself. He lied about struggling as a single parent using the money from my mom. And you lied to my husband and me, trying to bind us to your home. Both of you are a perfect match for your lies. Please, stay away from us and my mother. With no excuses left, my father and my mother-in-law were speechless. Ignoring their stunned faces, we left the hospital with my mother. Later, Dr. Mia was arrested and lost her medical license. She had forged medical documents multiple times and was sentenced to imprisonment. Additionally, the hospital she worked for is suing her for defamation. My mother-in-law had bribed a doctor for a fake diagnosis, leading to her having to pay back all the pension money she received with interest. She's also facing fraud charges, as informed by the police. Mike says he's cut ties with her, so he's not bothered about her future. I'm trying not to care either. As for me, I realized I had been somewhat dependent on my mother-in-law. Feeling betrayed sent me into a mental spiral, so I've been seeing a therapist at the hospital where my mother works. Regarding my reunion with my mother, when I was getting a referral at my previous hospital, the doctor's name I was referred to was the same as my mother's. To my surprise, it was actually her. My mother was skeptical when she saw a patient named me, but during the consultation, she realized it was me. Our reunion can only be described as miraculous. I can't be treated by my mother due to hospital rules, but she supports me from behind the scenes. I've been back to my job at the office while still attending therapy. When visiting Dr. Ryan, who informed me of the truth about my mother-in-law, I heard that he and my husband were old high school buddies. We now often hang out, with Ryan visiting our place, and everything feels like old times. It may be hard for me to forget how I was tied up by my mother-in-law and my father. But my husband, my mother, and Dr. Ryan always encourage me to take things easy and do what I want. Thanks to that, I'm planning trips with my friends or going to cafes by myself. From today on, I'll be taking care of this little one. Thanks for everything up until now. My mother-in-law exclaimed this to me with a warm smile on her face. Out of the blue, she came over to our house, grinning as she hugged my daughter, Emily. Emily looked dumbfounded at first, but as she began to comprehend her grandmother's words, she tried to wriggle out of her embrace. After holding Emily tight, my mother-in-law flashed another bright smile and said, "You should just leave now. My name is Susan. I work in an office building in the city. I'm a working mom. The building I work in isn't huge, but it's bustling because it houses more than just our company. I always find myself chatting with women of my age group, so I have many friends in the building. I've been recognized for my work in the accounting department and lead a fulfilling life. When I get home, my husband Paul and our 11-year-old daughter Emily are there. Paul and I manage our busy schedules, sharing household chores and childcare responsibilities. He genuinely cherishes both Emily and me. However, our blissful days started to change little by little. Paul tends to impose his own likes and interests on Emily. At first, it was soccer. It's one thing if Emily wants to play, but it felt forceful when he'd only let her play soccer even though she'd rather play in the sandbox. Yet, as she grew older, Emily became a soccer-loving girl who could stand toe-to-toe with her male classmates. Of course, she dreams of making her mark as a female soccer player in the future. I've become one of her biggest fans. But, Paul's enthusiasm seemed to last only in the early days. Lately, he's all about swimming. Girls should definitely try swimming. Maybe synchronized swimming could be good? When Paul brought it up during dinner, Emily made a face, clearly perplexed.
But Dad, I love soccer. I find it more fun than swimming and I want to do it even more.
Soccer is cool, sure, but why would you, a girl, want to play a sport typically considered for boys? A palpable tension runs between the two of them. At times like these, I always struggle with when I should intervene. Emily has her own thoughts, so I'm torn whether it's right to interrupt and end the conversation. Emily talks back to her father.
Gender doesn't matter. Right now, soccer is fun and pursuing it is my dream.
You've been playing soccer so much, you've gotten quite toned. You're tanned and look like a boy. Don't women need to be slim to be attractive? If you were swimming, you wouldn't have to worry about tanning.
You!
Emily is taken aback by his condescending remarks. I immediately scold my husband.
How could you say that to our daughter? Her physique is proof of the hard training she's been doing.
Just because she's our only daughter. Even though she's training so hard, she's still a girl. What's gonna happen if she ends up being a muscular woman with a small chest? Isn't that sad?
Why can you say such horrible things?
Shocked, Emily falls silent. I yelled at my husband even louder than before, but he doesn't seem to realize he's being insensitive about female soccer players. Sure, the teams are co-ed now, but her competition is mostly men. Emily has her limits being a girl. There aren't any female-only soccer teams around here, So maybe it's time to consider something else. I'm not saying she should go pro in swimming. Isn't it normal for girls to have swimming lessons?
Enough!
Emily storms out, knocking her chair back and running to her room. In disbelief, I turn to my husband, who angrily says,
"We were in the middle of a conversation."
That wasn't a discussion. It was just him imposing his views, completely disregarding Emily's dignity and dreams. Later, when he wasn't around, I checked on her, and as expected, she told me with tearful eyes that she didn't want to talk to her father. The next morning, I suggested she either leave for school at a different time to avoid Paul, or if it's too tough, she can take the day off. I did my best to console her. From then on, every time Paul brought up swimming, Emily ignored him.
She thinks she's so special, ignoring me just because she's a girl. Even if she's going through her teenage years, it's a bit much.
My daughter just keeps shutting herself off from her father, who won't listen to her words. I strongly felt that we had to change this situation, so I told my husband multiple times.
The one who's going overboard is you. Why do you only push your own interests onto our daughter? Why do you need to badmouth soccer when you talk about the greatness of swimming? You're the one trying to rain on something she's passionate about. Please, just respect her feelings and thoughts.
But it seems like nothing's getting through to him. Instead, he snaps at me.
Now you're gonna tell me what to do? Who do you think is taking care of our daughter? Just because you're my wife doesn't mean you can boss me around. Tell her clearly to quit soccer.
My husband's habit of ordering me and our daughter around and saying things like "just because you're a woman" or "just because you're my wife," as if our gender gives him the right, stems from a specific reason. It's a boss of his. We also know him privately, and he's a very close friend. He has been to our house and, apparently, he had a lot to say behind our backs when he found out we both work. This boss seems friendly and easygoing on the surface, and my husband enjoyed his company because of his personality. However, as time went on, the boss's distorted views towards women became more apparent. He started to emphasize the differences between men and women, making more remarks that belittle women's capabilities. At first, my husband would just laugh it off, but gradually those words started to stick. The boss's belief that women have a domestic role, and it's greedy for them to work, started casting a shadow on my husband's heart. This shift in my husband's attitude created a huge rift in our relationship. Initially, he was pressuring me, who works outside the home, to quit my job and stay home. But he realized that with his income alone, it would be hard to maintain our current lifestyle. So, he stopped pushing me outright to quit, but he keeps on preaching about the greatness of being a stay-at-home mom. Yet, that wasn't enough. And eventually, his frustration turned towards our daughter. He probably sympathizes with his boss because he imposes his own tastes and beliefs. He doesn't think about Emily's opinions or her future at all. He just thinks that since Emily is a woman, it's natural for her to obey his commands. The only way to mend this strained relationship is to change him. But no matter what we say or how, nothing seems to get through to him. On top of that, all we get is an outdated response: "Who does she think she is, a woman, challenging me?" I was distressed, but I couldn't let Emily suffer any longer. I finally brought up the idea of divorce to Paul. "I want to distance myself from you, for Emily's future," I said. But he was vehemently against it.
"This is why women are so foolish. If you really had Emily's future in mind, you'd know it's a bad idea to divorce a breadwinner like me. With rising college expenses, do you really think you can support her all by yourself? You're just too dumb. I'll guide you properly, so just shut up and follow."
He said this with an angry expression. His words were filled with confidence, as if he believed he was completely in the right. I've reached my limit. Taking a deep breath, I faced him. Yes, our income will decrease and preparing for college will be hard. But above all, I can't leave Emily by your side any longer. You don't think about her future at all. You just want to control her, don't you? This is the prime time of her life, and it's unfair for her to be dominated by her father. That's why I think we should part ways. I don't expect Emily to become a professional athlete, nor do I think she absolutely can't make it. I just want to support my daughter in pursuing what she loves. And you, who disrespect our daughter's dignity, are nothing but harmful. I believe it's my duty to provide an environment where Emily can safely explore her potential.
Don't just casually bring up divorce. If you want to leave, then just go on your own.
You're telling me to leave? When did I say that? And how do you plan to live with Emily if I do? Gonna call your mom? Paul crossed his arms, remaining stubborn. But when I stood my ground, his expression quickly turned smug.
It's your fault for mentioning divorce. I should just call my mom now and let her discipline you.
Paul acted immediately. He called his mother, who lives nearby.
Hello, Mom? Look, I'm in a bit of a bind. Susan suddenly mentioned getting a divorce. I'm just as shocked. I hate to ask, but can you come over and set her straight? You're a woman, too. Dad must have set you straight before, right? So, you can do the same for Susan?
He said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Most of what he said was blaming me for being selfish. It's quite sickening to hear him talk to his mother in that way. Regardless, my mother-in-law replied, I'm on my way. And it turned out we'd be discussing the divorce. Is Grandma coming? However, since we were discussing this in the living room, Emily came out of her room. We didn't want her to hear us talk about the divorce, so we had told her to stay in her room. She must have sensed something was amiss. Soon, my mother-in-law arrived, and as she caught sight of Emily, she rushed over, pushing past us to hug the little girl tightly. Then she turned to Paul and me with an angry look. I've heard everything, Emily, you've been through a lot. Paul smirked, thinking he had the upper hand, and glanced at me smugly. From now on, I'll take care of Emily. Susan, you can't take it anymore, can you? Just pack up your things and be out by tonight. Upon hearing this, Paul burst out laughing. Pointing at me, he said,
See, even Mom agrees. If you apologize now, I might forgive you. How dare you, a wife, defy your husband like that? Say you're sorry.
At this, Emily jumped out of her grandmother's embrace. She ran past the adults and into her room. My mother-in-law tried to follow, but the door opened immediately. There stood Emily, with a backpack on, a glossy sports bag slung over her shoulder, and even a cute little green carry-on suitcase in tow. She approached me with a smile.
I'm ready to go. Grandma can take care of the rest. I don't want a creepy dad like him.
She then took my hand. Her sunburned skin made her seem more robust, just like Paul had mentioned. Yet, feeling the warmth of her still tender hand, I nearly shed a tear.
Let's get going, Mom.
The one who was shocked was Paul. I had mentioned leaving, but he probably hadn't anticipated Emily wanting to come with me. Moreover, he was surprised at the bags packed to the brim and how well prepared everything seemed. What are you talking about? Emily, you can stay in this house. What we don't need is a nagging mother, right? I'm gonna kick out her and Grandma will come in your place. I'm gonna take you to swimming lessons next time, so calm down, alright? The husband, even at this point, kept making selfish remarks. However, it seemed the daughter had decided to ignore Paul, turning her back on him completely. Suddenly, the mother-in-law interjected with a puzzled look. Swimming lessons? Not soccer? Before I could say anything, the daughter spoke up. Dad doesn't like seeing my training and getting a muscular body. He thinks I should get a nice figure, wear cute swimsuits, and have lots of pictures taken. He says girls feel happier when they're popular with boys. Creepy, right? Hearing this from the daughter, both the mother-in-law and I were in shock. The mother-in-law raised her voice.
Paul! What on earth are you telling our daughter? You're not looking at her in that way, are you?
Paul flinched and looked around nervously. It was clear that, even in situations like this, Paul was always on thin ice with his mother.
It's a misunderstanding. But come on, no one wants a girl who looks like a man, right? It's definitely better if she focuses on her looks, dresses to impress guys, and uses makeup. In the end, she's gonna support her husband at home, right?
Paul tried to defend himself. My mother-in-law sighed. What would your late father say if he heard this? Thinking my mother-in-law was on his side, Paul looked even more flustered. But it wasn't surprising. Almost all of Paul's derogatory comments about women, and the way he treated me and Emily, had been reported to his mother. But I had hesitated to tell her about his criticisms of Emily's physique. It would have been too painful for any mother to hear. Paul had long since lost his filter. He always spoke disrespectfully about women, even to his mother, and no amount of scolding had any effect. My mother-in-law, unlike Paul, was a strong, dependable person. Eventually, after several consultations, we divorced, and a plan was set for my mother-in-law to re-educate Paul.
I'm sorry, Emily, Susan. I'll take responsibility for raising this boy,
the mother-in-law said, clearly referring to her son, Paul. Thus, in a role reversal, Emily and I temporarily moved into his mother's house. True to her word, she moved into our home and began Paul's re-education. The divorce was finalized, and we were supposed to go back to our normal lives. Finding a new place and dividing assets might take time, but living as a married couple was out of the question. As soon as Emily put down her backpack at her grandmother's house, she burst into tears. I hugged her, feeling more than ever that I never wanted to see Paul again. Just a week later, while I was at work, I had an unexpected visitor. The visitor's name was Mr. Smith, a name that sounded familiar to me. When I confirmed his full name, it was unmistakably that of my husband's boss. The very man who had influenced Paul so much. I was shocked and wondered why such a person would come to my workplace, yet I headed to the lounge booth within the office building. We have limited space for guests at our company, and it was currently being used for meetings with other clients. When we run out, we often borrow common areas within the building. For major negotiations, we might rent out a separate meeting room. Most of our walk-in visitors are salespeople, so I asked him to wait in the lounge. But it wasn't just Mr. Smith there. Paul was there too. Apparently, they had both taken a detour from their field sales to visit me. We can't talk properly at home with my mother around. Figured you'd take us seriously at work, Paul said. It seemed my husband, knowing I had his mother on my side, brought his idolized boss. What he wanted to say was the same old line. You need to settle down and listen to me.
Heads of households should have the final say, you know. Women are just an accessory to men. Dressing up nicely is a given. Thinking they can compete with men in sports or anything is presumptuous. Man, I'm far from perfect. Can't discipline my unruly wife or daughter. Mr. Smith, I really need your help.
Looking at my husband laughing and acting smug, I was getting a headache. To make matters worse, he said he would never approve of Emily's soccer and assumed I might as well quit my not-so-important job. The issue was Mr. Smith, sitting next to him, grinning at my discomfort, backing up every word Paul said. There wasn't Paul's mother here to take my side. I was being interrupted at work and, grappling with how to handle them, their harsh words paralyzed me. I was holding back from snapping at them, fearing things might escalate to violence. I could feel my eyes burning with tears. I was just grateful Emily wasn't here to see this. I wouldn't want her to see her father with such a scornful expression. I was contemplating leaving without a word, when someone spoke to us. Isn't that Mr. Smith from AB Company's sales department? What are you guys up to? Both men turned around and, in unison, quickly stood up. An older gentleman was standing there. He was well-dressed and clearly held a position of authority. Beside him was a woman, perhaps his aide or secretary. From the disdainful look she gave Paul and Mr. Smith, it was clear she had heard their conversation.
Mr. Miller, what brings you here?
My office is on the 3rd floor. You guys usually visit the branch office's conference room for sales. I guess you might not be interested in knowing this, but it might be useful for you to remember whether you're visiting the branch or the headquarters. At the sound and content of the man's chilling voice, Paul and Mr. Smith were left speechless, their faces pale as ghosts. The man was a business owner on the third floor of the office building. If he didn't have meetings or appointments, he'd be over here, and I've seen him a few times before. The CEO remembered me and had been secretly listening to the intense conversation between us in the lounge. It wasn't until his secretary mentioned it that he realized Mr. Smith was a sales rep from one of their partners. "Heard she's your wife, huh? To act that way towards a woman and kids. Was that young sales guy with you, Mr. Smith? Hand over your business card now." The CEO then collected business cards from both of them, casting a disdainful look at the trembling pair. After all, they had been working in a conference room so grand one could mistake it for the CEO's office of a headquarters. I found out later that Paul's company had stirred up a massive commotion, like poking a hornet's nest. "We'll have to reconsider our partnership with you."
Please, I beg of you. I was just disciplining my not-so-competent wife. We won't cause any trouble for your company. Forgot that most of our consumers are homemakers raising kids? Even if it's someone outside the company, being associated with someone of such beliefs would hurt our image. Just get out of here.
Paying no attention to me, my ex-husband and his boss kept apologizing. But even their desperate pleas reeked of misogyny, and the CEO remained stern. I wasn't in a position to defend them, so I just watched. Perhaps due to the commotion, various office workers were giving the two cold stares. Eventually, the two were chased out of the building like flies. Later on, the CEO did reduce and eventually cut off all business dealings with my ex-husband's company. Rumors also spread about their behavior, causing many clients to back out, and the company removed the two from their sales positions. They lost trust from clients and within their company, ending up in positions where they were given no significant tasks. As for me, since that incident, the CEO has personally introduced me to some top-notch divorce attorneys, and we've kept in touch. I was advancing with custody investigations with his support. Juggling work, matters concerning Emily, and all procedures were tough, but with legal support, I was able to handle things more calmly. However, one day, my ex-husband and Mr. Smith showed up at my workplace again.
Please get Mr. Miller for me, help me out.
They pleaded loudly. I didn't feel as intimidated by them as I used to. It wasn't that they had changed, but rather that I had grown capable of taking their words calmly. Whispers and murmurs of surprise emanated from my colleagues towards the two who waited outside. This is gonna cause problems for other companies too. Eventually, I had no choice but to call the police. When they arrived, my ex-husband, Paul, got aggressive and was taken away. Thankfully, no one got hurt, and while he wasn't arrested, the ostracization within the company intensified. Paul, once seen as a potential star in sales alongside Mr. Smith, couldn't bear the shame and chose to resign early. As for Smith, his attitude didn't change. In fact, his behavior worsened due to his dissatisfaction with how he was treated. He brazenly started to slack off at work, arguing it was the company's fault for not giving him work. Furthermore, his aggressive behavior and misogynistic comments increased, and it seems he eventually faced a lawsuit from female colleagues. Later on, through the grapevine, I heard Mr. Smith sought legal help. However, when a female attorney listened to his story, he spewed outrageous comments like,
"Get me a male attorney."
Or,
"How can a woman be an attorney? How much did you pay? Maybe you're paying with your body?"
Leading him to be banned from that law firm. I was transferred to a new branch of my company. Given that my ex-husband knew my whereabouts and being a single mother had its challenges, I was moved to a department that prioritized a more child-friendly work environment. I couldn't move too far because of Emily's school and soccer team. I didn't want to change her environment entirely. Fortunately, the new location was just a few subway stops away, so as long as I was careful, I wouldn't run into Paul. Working in this new environment was quite stimulating for me. I could ensure time at home to chat with Emily, feeling fulfilled in both my work and personal life. Emily still passionately played soccer every day. I'm so happy to fully support her dreams. I decided to occasionally meet with Paul's mother. We'd make a bit of a trip to enjoy a cup of coffee at a fancy cafe and chat.
Emily seems to be back in good spirits, doesn't she? Yes, she really is. She adapted to the new environment quickly. Leaving home seems to have been good for her. I should have made that decision sooner.
When I smiled and nodded, my mother-in-law took a moment and then talked to me about my ex-husband Paul's behavior. Paul had quit his job and apparently stayed home for a while, deeply depressed. During that time, Mr. Smith faced lawsuits from female colleagues at the company, and naturally they lost touch. He probably had other things on his mind. It seems that since putting some physical distance from Mr. Smith, Paul's perspective has been gradually changing. I was told that he's breaking away from the influence of Mr. Smith and slowly going back to how he used to be. I quietly breathed a sigh of relief. While it seems we still need my mother-in-law to keep an eye on him for a bit, I do prefer the kinder Paul I once knew. It's uncertain when he might relapse, so I haven't let him see our daughter, Emily. Any exchanges are done through lawyers or Paul's mother, avoiding direct contact.
I won't ever say you should remarry him. If he's truly remorseful, he'd feel too guilty to even ask for it. You've got Emily to consider too, you both should prioritize your own happiness.
Paul's mother concluded with that. I had always known she was dependable, but with this matter, I realized how invaluable she really is. Regardless of my history with Paul, I want to have a good relationship with her as an individual. When I expressed this, she got teary-eyed but agreed shyly. We're planning to watch a soccer game together. Emily has been selected as a regular player among the seniors, so we're gonna cheer her on with all we've got.
I'm gonna take your baby and leave it in the mountains. I'm nursing my son right here, okay?
Upon hearing my words, a sound of a smartphone dropping came from the other end of the phone line. It was Lisa, my sister-in-law. She must have checked the back seat, for a scream followed shortly after. Come to think of it, Lisa had always been tormenting me. Indeed, there were the scenes at the wedding reception, the constant spam emails, and the sudden visit right before I gave birth. But that scream marked the beginning of Lisa's end. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm 27 and just recently gave birth and returned from the hospital. My husband, Michael, is completely smitten with our newborn son, Alex, and he reluctantly went to work today. I get along well with my in-laws and you could say we're living a happy married life. Except for Lisa, of course. From the very beginning, Lisa and I didn't gel well. Michael and I were classmates in middle school. Our school in a small town in Nebraska was peaceful with fewer students and an atmosphere where bullying was unheard of. Michael's family runs a decent-sized construction company in the area. Mostly working within the state but occasionally getting orders from outside. It's well regarded. Their house was large, and our group of friends would often hang out or study there. Michael's mom was always welcoming. They had a part-time helper who kept the house tidy, and during her breaks, she'd serve us snacks and drinks. One summer day, while working on homework, we heard unfamiliar, heavy footsteps. Wondering who it could be, we were soon hit with an overpowering scent of perfume.
Mikey, I'm back!
A flamboyant, large woman called his name and literally jumped on him. He pushed her away, exclaiming,
Sis! We're studying here, okay? Oh come on, Mikey. It's not nice to treat your sister like that after such a long time.
She pouted.
I told you, we're studying. We have exams coming up. Yeah, whatever.
She then scanned our group, pausing to look at each one of us. While she was doing that, he went to call his mom. She seemed to be sizing each of us up. When her gaze met mine, she frowned deeply.
Ew, why is she here?
No one really understood what she meant. She gestured towards some of the others and said, You're okay, and so are you. But you. She pointed at me. Don't get close to my Mikey. You seem so dull and gloomy. I was stunned, never having been spoken to like that before. My friends quickly jumped to my defense, saying things like, She always helps us with homework. Or, she's really smart. What's that got to do with anything?
Being around her might make Mikey gloomy too.
She waved her hands dismissively at me. She was wearing a dress with too many frills and ribbons for a summer day. And she was quite imposing, especially compared to us middle schoolers. I'm leaving. I didn't listen to my friend's pleas to stay and hurriedly left, hearing Lisa's amused laughter behind me. That day, I got an apology call from Michael. I'm sorry for what Lisa did. She's always been like that, ever since we were kids.
Oh, really?
I don't know why she said those things to you.
It's okay. It's not your fault, Michael.
But since that incident, every time someone mentioned going to his house, I hesitated. Time flew, we graduated, and went to different high schools. Our group drifted apart, and I lost touch with Michael. I bumped into him again when I moved to New York for college. After the orientation, as I was wandering through clubs trying to decide which to join, someone suddenly grabbed my arm.
Is that you, Michelle? Michael? Is that you?
It seemed too good to be true, but Michael was attending the same college and was in the same department as me. We had different majors, but we ended up taking many of the same classes. We started hanging out a lot. Those 4 years deepened our bond. Then came job hunting. Neither of us ended up going back to our hometowns. Michael was expected to take over his family's business, so I was surprised when I heard he wasn't returning. Then he told me.
You know, I never told you this, but I ran away from Lisa.
I was shocked to hear this from him, who was looking so serious.
What do you mean? When I started high school, Lisa got a job at a local company through my dad's connections. She had always wanted to stay in New York and have fun, but she couldn't find a job anywhere else.
Remembering the loud and overpowering presence of Lisa, I thought.
So that's what happened. That's why I wanted to find a job and get married here. Is that okay with you?
What do you mean by okay?
You're the only one I want to be with.
I couldn't help but hug Michael tightly. 3 years later, he proposed, and we decided to get married. When we went to his family home to introduce ourselves, Lisa was waiting for us. She looked at me and said,
"What are you doing here? You're that girl from back then? I thought I'd never see you again after I threatened you that day."
I remember being oddly calm and surprised she remembered that after 10 years. Then, at our wedding, Lisa caused a scene.
Why can't I wear the dress I like?
She had arrived in a huge, fluffy white dress. That made her look like a snowman. She arrived at the last moment. So we knew she did it on purpose. There was no time to change her outfit, and she wouldn't have fit into a backup dress anyway. She had always been on the larger side, and she seemed even bigger now. Then, at the reception, she really made a scene. After drinking way too much, she stumbled up during Michael's boss's speech, saying,
"You don't have to hide that thin hair of yours,"
and laughingly took off his wig. I'll never forget the look on Michael's face. Everyone knows not to mention things like that, especially in public. Michael immediately ran over and apologized profusely. Our in-laws quickly grabbed Lisa from both sides and took her out. After the reception, we demanded an apology from Lisa. But she just sat there, crossed her legs, turned her head away, and said,
"I will never accept your marriage. Why on earth is Michael with someone like you? Enough is enough, Lisa. You always mess with my friends and partners. Do you know why I left our hometown? It was because of you. Mikey."
Lisa turned to look at Michael for the first time.
"Ew, why the scary look? Oh right, it must be because of her. Of course. Ew, she's just the type to sit in the corner of the classroom and quietly read books. She must have been talking behind my back to Mikey. I'm sure of it. It was my decision not to introduce you to Michelle for so long. Everything falls apart when you're around. The reason I didn't make the varsity baseball team in high school was my own lack of skill. Yet you still went to confront the coach, and after that, I couldn't stay in the team. You remember that, don't you? But that's not true. It's awful that the coach doesn't recognize Mikey's talents. You are meant to shine. I've always supported you that way.
My father-in-law sighed as he looked at Lisa, who was shouting hysterically. However, after a while, he got up, grabbed her hand, and said,
Lisa, get ready quickly. We're giving up the room you're living in now.
What are you talking about?
Just now, there was a call from your company. That person has been an important contact of yours, having been associated with your company's deputy director for a long time. What?
Lisa's astonished voice echoed throughout the room.
So, you were rude to him. You know what that means, right? He was quite angry, but he said he'll continue doing business with the company in exchange for firing you. I let you live on your own because you said you're working, but that's over. We won't let you out of the house so easily. And we're gonna put you to work hard here.
My father-in-law's stern voice was a relief to Michelle and Michael.
You too, live your life without any worries.
Don't worry about the company. Even if you're going to take over, it's still a long way off. Their parents' words were reassuring. However, that was not the end of it. Every day, my phone received harassing calls and a barrage of emails. When I checked her messages during my break at work, I saw a list of comments like, "Because of you, Mikey doesn't come back to his hometown. Mikey is mine. He should always be at home with me. You're not fit to be Mikey's wife. Persuade Mikey to come back." I was seriously considering blocking her number. But then I was overwhelmed by the fear that she might just show up at my door if I did. Around that time, I often felt sick. So, I just let the calls go to voicemail and ignored the texts. Then, I found out I was pregnant. With the persistent nausea, it made sense. When I informed both my parents and Michael's parents, both families immediately congratulated us.
So, where's Lisa?
She's out right now. Don't worry, I plan on keeping it from her as long as possible. Over the phone, I could hear the weariness in Michael's mother's voice.
Thank you. How is Lisa doing there?
Well, she's still not back. Every day after work, she's out somewhere in her car.
How's the work at your husband's company?
Michael's mother sighed deeply. It's a mess. Lisa doesn't even try to learn the basics of her job, and it seems she can't. I was shocked to hear that. And lately, she keeps saying this, that she was deeply hurt by what was said back then. She became depressed and doesn't want to go to work. Even when I tell her to see a doctor and get a note, she says she's too depressed to move. Although I send her off, I've heard she often skips work without notice.
But she drives around a lot, right?
Yes. She's unpredictable, but I'll make sure she doesn't come bothering you during your crucial time. Thanks to Michael's mother, I didn't face any surprise visits from Lisa while I was home. However, I continued to receive a barrage of emails from her. When are you gonna divorce? You should leave. You're just holding Mikey back. This child looks just like Mikey's first love, completely different from you. Looks like me, actually. The messages were repetitive and draining. I had another issue too. The morning sickness hit me early and hard. Michael was concerned and suggested I take an early leave from work and return to my parents' house.
But isn't my parents' place in the same school district as yours? I fear Lisa might show up any day.
Michael pondered over this and then called his father. He replied, "All right, since Lisa can't seem to hold a job anyways, I'll force her to join me on a long-term project."
Is it far this time?
It's nearby, but on an island. So, she can't return without my permission. It was reassuring to hear that. I expressed my gratitude to Michael's parents and decided to return to my parents' house. Upon visiting Michael's family home, both my father-in-law and Lisa were out, making the large house seem lonely.
It's okay. We're relieved without her around.
It seemed they were tired of their daily life with Lisa. However, close to my delivery date, a shocking event took place.
Michelle! Why are you here?
Lisa was banging loudly on my parents' door. At that time, my mother had gone out shopping. I checked all the windows to make sure they were locked. Everything was sealed tight. As long as I didn't go out, I'd be fine. But then, there was a loud crashing noise. Through the living room curtains, I could see a figure. It was Lisa. She was holding a metal baseball bat and stomped her way into the house, shoes on.
There you are! I knew you were home, Michelle.
I grabbed my phone and made my way to the front door. Lisa seemed to have predicted my move as she quickly closed in on me. I knew I was in danger and tried to rush upstairs. But at that moment, I felt a terrible blow to my back. Lisa had struck me right in the middle of my back with the baseball bat she held. Ouch! But I couldn't just stand there. I choked on the impact, feeling a rising sensation from my stomach, almost like nausea. Still clutching my belly, I began to climb the familiar stairs, trying to move as swiftly as I could.
Wait up!
Lisa shouted at the top of her lungs. No way I was waiting. My destination was the room on the second floor I'd used before going to college. I've been living on the first floor since I came back home, so I don't usually use it. But in there, I can lock the door from the inside. Lisa, groaning, followed with heavy steps, laboriously making her way up our winding staircase. She paused midway, catching her breath. I took this chance and darted into my room. I locked the door and dragged a table in front of it for extra security. Relief flooded me, and I slumped to the floor. That's when I noticed the carpet was damp.
My water broke!
I realized this and felt my body shivering uncontrollably. Oh no, not now. On the other side of the door, Lisa had caught up. She was pounding on the door with the bat. Each thud was heavy, a testament to her strength, and random thoughts raced through my head. Then,
hey! What the hell?
I heard my mom's voice from outside the window. She's back, I thought, relieved. But I couldn't let her in. It's too dangerous. I called my mom on my cell.
Michelle! Are you okay? This shattered window!
Mom. Call 911. Get an ambulance and the police.
You mean the police, but an ambulance? Don't tell me.
Yes, that's right, my water broke. But I'm trapped upstairs. Hurry, but don't let Lisa see you. She's got a bat. I managed to say this before I fainted from the stress. When I came to, everything seemed to be over. I felt strange and my head was foggy.
Michelle, thank God you're awake.
A familiar voice. Michael was by my bed. What happened? Then it hit me. My stomach. Michelle, when they brought you in, things were looking dire. They had to perform an emergency C-section.
My baby? Where's my baby?
He's fine. A healthy baby boy. Thank you. We'll go see him together later. I took a deep breath of relief. And?
Ouch!
You can't do that. The doctor said you have a pretty bad fracture. I shivered. Was it when Lisa hit me? Did the bat strike my ribs?
Thank God it wasn't the baby.
I truly felt that from the bottom of my heart. Michael then apologized. I'm sorry. Huh? Why are you apologizing? That baseball bat Lisa brought over was in my room. Oh, I remembered. It was the bat Michael had once used for the baseball team he had to quit midway. I shouldn't have left it where she could find it. It's not your fault. If she hadn't found your bat, she probably would have taken Dad's golf club. That's when it hit me. What happened to Lisa? Well, she was caught red-handed breaking the windows of your family home. I thought Lisa was supposed to be on a work trip to the island. It seems she overheard a phone conversation between my father and me. About my pregnancy? Yeah. She must have figured out the timing of when she was brought to the island for work and lost her cool.
We'll need to cool things down for a while.
I felt relieved after hearing that. The next day after we were discharged from the hospital, my son, Alex, was as lively as ever, and he was now breastfeeding. I was gently stroking Alex's back when my smartphone rang. It was Michelle. I thought about ignoring it, but the call continued longer than I expected. However, after the 40th ring, I decided to answer. Hello?
Finally. Why did you take so long? How long did you plan to make me wait?
Another noise overlapped with her voice.
Stop that! Ugh, it's so loud!
Hey, Lisa. Do you have a baby with you? What I heard next was indeed the voice of a baby.
That's right. I took your son. But he's so noisy, crying nonstop.
I was confused. Why would there be a baby there?
Ugh. I thought I'd take him home and raise him my way, but he's so loud.
I quickly reached for the home phone. Hello, is this Michael's mom?
Why, what's up? Is Alex okay?
Yes, but...
Isn't that Alex crying?
Lisa was still making a racket in the background. It seems my mother-in-law heard the noise. Whispering, I asked, do you know where Lisa is right now?
Huh? She's been quiet since the police handed her over.
She just called, and it sounds like she has a baby with her. My mother-in-law gasped in shock. There were some noises. Probably her checking if Lisa's car was around. I put the home phone near my smartphone.
You checked the hospital to see if your son was there, didn't ya? Tough luck, he's right here with me. Ugh, so darn loud. Oh, I got an idea.
Lisa, what have you been saying all this time? With a pleased look as if she had come up with something, I asked her with a sinking feeling.
I'm gonna leave your baby out in the mountains.
But Alex is here with me, breastfeeding.
What?
The next moment, a scream echoed from the other end.
My Alex.
I gently poked Alex's cheek. He let out a cheerful laugh. Lisa must have heard that.
Wait, then whose baby do I have here?
What don't you get?
Wasn't your son still in the hospital?
My son and I have been discharged and are at home. There was a loud thud followed by the sound of a baby crying even louder and Lisa screaming. She must have realized she kidnapped someone else's baby. I grabbed the home phone. Did you hear that? Something serious has happened.
Yes. I'm gonna call the hospital right now. You stay put.
The call ended. What a reliable woman. Indeed, I was not in a position to move right now. Given the constant need for breastfeeding, I couldn't leave my son's side. For the time being, I decided to focus all my energy on soothing my son, who started crying due to the noise coming from the other side of the smartphone. Later, I was informed that Lisa's car was found parked by the seaside road. Lisa was found dazed inside the car. The baby placed in the car seat in the back was safely retrieved. He was mildly dehydrated and was sternly reprimanded by the paramedics. Needless to say, his parents were furious with Lisa. This wasn't just a family squabble like breaking a window. It was a kidnapping involving someone else's child. The parents of the kidnapped baby were mildly dehydrated and were furious, saying,
Our child was almost killed. We won't let this slide.
They clearly showed an attitude of not forgiving Lisa tomorrow. My father-in-law, who rushed back in a hurry, reportedly told the police.
There's no handling this at home anymore. I thought I was keeping an eye on things to make sure Michelle and others weren't inconvenienced, but this is the last straw. I'm cutting ties with you for good.
Lisa, the one being told this, seemed initially clueless about what he was talking about. Then, the moment she understood, she reportedly let out a loud scream. But why someone else's child? The police gave the answer to the in-laws. Firstly, Lisa had been quiet at the in-laws' house for a while. But it seems that was to plot revenge against me for being detained over the matter of breaking the glass at her family home. She learned about my upcoming discharge from overhearing a conversation between her parents and planned to kidnap my son before that. But Lisa missed the exact discharge date. My release from the hospital had been brought forward. Both my son and I were in good enough health to be discharged, and suddenly, there was a need for our bed. I gladly agreed to the early release. Lisa came to the hospital after I had already been discharged. She apparently sneaked into a patient room where another mother and child with the same last name as ours were staying and took the child when she sensed I wasn't there. Apparently, with her large build, wearing a sling carrying a baby, she just looked like any other patient being discharged. The bassinet was one of the items that my mother-in-law had hurriedly bought in preparation for my baby, including a crib and other things. She quickly sneaked into the house and, while looking for her car keys, spotted it and thought it was just perfect to take. The baby's mother, who happened to be in the bathroom, and the hospital were in an uproar. The situation became clear thanks to a call from my mother-in-law, and both the police and ambulances were dispatched. The police also came to our house, checked the call history on my smartphone, and said they were able to pinpoint Lisa's location. So, as a result, Lisa is gonna be in jail for a while. Deservedly so. She's gonna face a criminal trial, and lawyers keep coming, asking for testimonies that would be in her favor, but the in-laws firmly declined and said they won't support or help her in any way. My smartphone finally went silent. We sighed in relief, thinking that peaceful days are finally upon us. At this rate, the day when Michael will return to take over the family home and we all live happily together seems close.
From now on, we are supporting my mom and sister. If you don't like it, then I'm gonna divorce you.
Why do I have to be kicked out of the house? I can't possibly agree with what my husband suddenly brought up, and his sister is an absolute monster. Living with someone like her would surely drive me insane. I tried everything in my power to avoid living together, but my pleas fell on deaf ears, and in the end, he threatened me with divorce. But I'm not someone who gives up easily. Now that it has come to this, I want to get a grip on his vulnerabilities and make him regret. It seems he's hiding something from me, but if he thinks he can keep it a secret and have his way, he's sorely mistaken. My name is Linda Hernandez. I'm a 38-year-old working housewife, and we've been married for 2 years. We don't have kids yet, but we both want them soon. Ever since I graduated from a community college, I've been working full-time at a general hospital, but I've cut back on my hours to undergo fertility treatments. Currently, I'm working part-time only in the mornings at a nearby private clinic, but I have concerns. The concerns I'm troubled with. The worries I'm holding on to are about the fertility treatment and my husband, Jake. I fell head over heels for Jake, who works smoothly in sales at an insurance company, and that led to our marriage. We both had a mutual desire to have children. A home filled with the laughter of children is so appealing, don't you think?
I've always wanted kids, but I'm getting on in years.
Don't be so downhearted. We'll have them in no time. Jake seemed to think that we'd naturally have kids without any effort, but reality isn't that easy. 2 years have passed, and there's still no sign of us having a child. I discussed the treatment with Jake, but his response was unexpected. Do we really need to go to a clinic? I mean, you hear about celebrities having babies in their 40s. Why not let nature take its course?
I want to do everything possible. You said you wanted children too, didn't you?
It's not like we're sick or anything, and it's gonna cost money.
We're going to find out whether there's an issue or not. And if you're worried about money, I'll pay from my savings. Is that okay?
Jake wasn't entirely convinced, but reluctantly agreed when I offered to cover the treatment costs from my pocket money. Fortunately, my parents also agreed to provide some financial assistance, which was a great relief. However, the situation was more serious than I thought, and it became challenging to continue working full-time while visiting the clinic.
The doctor said I need to visit every 3 days. With work and all, it's gonna be tough.
Well, you've come this far, and your parents are helping with the costs, right? So, it should be fine. Jake's response, which basically meant he was okay as long as it didn't affect his wallet, left a bad taste in my mouth. Still, I reassured myself, thinking that everything will turn around once we have a child. On a weekday when I had the day off from my part-time job, and Jake had gone to work, I enjoyed some rare alone time. Then, a call came in from an unfamiliar number. Picking up the phone, it was Jake's sister, Jennifer. Nevertheless, I wonder why the phone number has changed. It's a bit concerning. Did you change your number? I was surprised when an unknown number called.
There were some reasons. Anyway, can I come over now? Is Jake at work?
Jake isn't here on weekdays, but I'm off work. What time do you think you'll arrive? However, Jennifer started speaking without regard to my question.
I have so much to talk to you about, Linda. Let's have a good girls' chat.
I just wanted to know what time she'd be arriving, but she didn't answer that. Eventually, Jennifer arrived at my place right after I had taken a few bites of my lunch. So, muttering,
I should have known.
I hurriedly put the rest of my lunch back in the fridge. Welcome. If you'd told me when you were coming, I would have prepared lunch for you.
I haven't had lunch yet. I'm starving.
Oh, would you like me to make something? Jennifer quickly glanced at the kitchen shelf and waved her hand. On the shelf was a gift pound cake from a department store. It was a limited item, and I was looking forward to eating it as a treat on a special day.
Nah, if I eat too much, I'll gain weight. But, I'm curious about this cake. Let's just have this for lunch. Where's the knife?
Looking around the room for a knife to cut the pound cake, there was something slightly unsettling about Jennifer's behavior. I'll cut it. My place is a bit messy, and it's embarrassing if you look around too much.
It's no big deal. It doesn't bother me. I'll cut a slice for you too, Linda.
Saying that, she picked up the knife and began slicing the pound cake. I didn't have the energy to say anything. The thick, nearly 4-inch pound cake slice that Jennifer placed in front of me was so thin I could see through it. She immediately started talking again.
Listen, recently my boyfriend's been a bit distant. Even though I tell him I want to see him, he's always making excuses, like work or his daughter.
Really? Wait, he has a daughter?
But I'm a girl too. It's lonely. He could pay a bit more attention to me.
Engaging deeply in such conversations usually leads to even longer ones, which can be troublesome. In times like these, it's best to just keep nodding and smiling. This was one of the interpersonal skills I learned from my medical office job, but there was one thing Jennifer said that I couldn't ignore.
He told me if we had a child together, he'd leave his current wife.
Oh, is that so?
The other day I felt something was off, so I went to the doctor, and turns out, I'm pregnant. I'm so happy. I wonder when's the best time to tell him.
I nearly dropped my mug of tea. Pregnant? Wait a minute. He's married, has a kid, and you're pregnant? What's going on?
He says he doesn't find his wife's daughter cute. That's why he wants to live with me and have a cute child that looks like me.
You're kidding, right? Jennifer continued, puffing out her cheeks.
He probably wants some time to convince his wife, right? Well, they say a kind woman needs peace of mind.
I was rendered speechless for a moment by Jennifer's recklessness and the cruelty of her actions that could break a family apart. Go home.
What? Why? It's getting dark outside, and I need my boyfriend to come pick me up. Oh, and I was curious about the tea from that department store in the cupboard.
Please leave. I need a moment alone. To think that Jennifer would suddenly come over like a storm and then unload the bombshell of an affair and pregnancy, it's just too much. I've been going to the hospital wanting a child, taking medications I don't even want to, and yet, why is Jennifer, my sister-in-law who's having an affair, the one expecting? To begin with, I can't believe that someone in my family could easily engage in such a horrible act like an affair. My mind is a mess, to the point where I can't even explain it to myself. About a week after Jennifer's explosive visit, Jake came home unusually early from work.
Oh, home on time today?
You usually come back on the last train. That's rare. Jake, however, threw his bag onto the floor and came up to me, agitated.
I heard from Jennifer. She said you said something terrible.
I mean, she did come over the other day, but did I say something that bad? I began, but then realized she must be talking about the affair and pregnancy. But it was too late.
2 nights ago, Jennifer called me crying. As her brother, I can't just ignore her when she's upset.
But, isn't it unreasonable to ask someone to keep silent after they've done something so wrong?
What are you saying? My sister's gone off the rails? Come on, spill it.
Both the affair and the pregnancy are such sensitive topics. Even if he's my husband, it's not easy to speak about, and Jennifer should explain herself. It wasn't my place to poke my nose in. Taking advantage of my silence, Jake continued to blame me.
Let me guess, you're gonna say it's your hormones making you irritable. You always get emotional so easily.
I wanted to retort that he was the one being emotional, but once it got to this point, Jake wasn't going to listen. My dear sister is being bullied. He's just fired up, thinking he's playing the hero, trying to protect her.
Poor Jennifer. You better apologize to her.
I didn't understand why I needed to apologize. But to prevent further complications, I decided to. I tried to apologize later on, but the conversation went nowhere that day. However, the next day, as if nothing had happened, Jennifer began calling and texting me. And she did it more often than before, which was quite a hassle. Sometimes, I couldn't reply during work, but if I left her messages unanswered, she'd complain to Jake. So, I would send a brief reply to keep the peace, but I wish she'd spare me from her gushing about her affair, day and night. I had talked to Jake about Jennifer a few times, but it was all in vain.
Right now, Linda's pretty much a stay-at-home wife, so she could at least listen to Jennifer's stories. What, are you jealous because Jennifer got pregnant first?
It's not like that. I'm busy too. If she expects an immediate response in the middle of the night, I end up losing sleep, sleep deprivation.
But Jennifer was so happy, saying, I never thought Linda would be this easy to talk to. I really want her to listen. So, you should go along with it.
Talking to Jake didn't resolve anything. Even as I'm lost in thought, the constant notifications from Jennifer never stop. What to do? But little did I know how naive I was to complain over calls and emails. I'd realized that later. About 2 months after discussing Jennifer's situation with Jake. The seasons were changing, and I thought about getting out some fall clothes. Just as I was about to get up, the doorbell rang. Did I order a package? Muttering to myself, I approached the front door only to be met with an unexpected sight. Massive cardboard boxes, like someone was moving, were being carried into the house one after another. The recipient's name was Jake, maybe it's work-related stuff? And Jake, the very person the packages were addressed to, neither contacted nor came home. I wish he'd communicate these things. After 3 days of no communication, he returned in the middle of the night, making a ruckus.
Hey, I'm home. No welcome? I was about to go to bed. It's 1 a.m. Can't you be a bit quieter? What's the big deal? Are you that upset I came back?
Maybe he was drunk, but he seemed very confrontational. He walked towards me but tripped over one of the boxes and fell dramatically.
Hey, clean this mess up.
These are all addressed to you. I can't just go opening them.
Back talking? And by the way, you should be the one taking care of these.
I was puzzled by Jake's statement. What do you mean I should?
Just what I said. These boxes contain Jennifer and Mom's stuff. Mostly Jennifer's, I bet.
Hold on, why would Jennifer and your mom's stuff be delivered here? With a smug look on his face, Jake began to explain.
It's for my sweet sister, of course. She's been renting, but her lease is almost up. She said she's gonna move in with her boyfriend or get married soon, so I figured I'd look out for her until then.
Hold on, you never told me.
I've been promoted to assistant manager, and I'll be earning more. It won't be a problem.
We got married 2 years ago, but to be honest, I hardly had any interactions with Jake's family. So, it's bewildering to be in this situation now. You mentioned once that you weren't close with your parents, didn't you, Jake?
Well, there was a time when I found my family a bit too much to handle. But now that I've been promoted to assistant manager and making a bit more money, I figured now's the best time to help out my folks and support my younger sister.
You're suddenly talking about living together, are you sure about this?
It'll work out. Plus, we've got a spare room, and if we use your room for storage, the four of us can live together. What's the problem?
He sounded like he had it all figured out, but I wasn't entirely convinced. Moreover, Jake talked about supporting Jennifer until she got married, but I wondered how much of Jennifer's story he really knew. From what I've heard, their versions don't quite match, and it gave me an uneasy feeling.
Starting today, we're supporting my mom and Jennifer. If you're not okay with that, I'm gonna divorce you. That's too sudden and not feasible.
I wouldn't want to live with them even if it was just for a short time.
Fine, then I'll divorce and leave. Give it a shot.
That said, I couldn't just pack up and leave immediately. I have to make all the necessary preparations in this house before doing so. Jake needs a reality check. First, I'll start by going through Jake's belongings. I've had suspicions for a while that Jake might be cheating on me. There were times he'd come home late, smelling of a woman's perfume, and I've spotted suspicious cards peeking from his pockets on several occasions. Does he really think I haven't noticed with all these clues lying around? He's fooling himself. Checking our shared computer, Jake had left his account logged in. I was able to go through his emails, and sure enough, they were incriminating. Reading the email filled with sweet words, I got the chills. The person he was emailing was a woman. Digging further, I found hotel newsletters and reservation confirmations. Apparently, he's been going there every Wednesday and Friday. He used to tell me he was out drinking with colleagues or clients on those days, but now everything clicked. I noted down the hotel's name, so if I stake out the place, I might be able to get photos for evidence. But I'm no expert, and the last thing I want is to get caught. I'll have to think of a foolproof way to tail him and gather evidence. Jennifer seems to be coming over to the house in 4 days, but before that, while investigating Jake's affair, I've decided to also check out Jennifer's movements, just to be on the safe side. Jake seems to think Jennifer is some sort of tragic heroine or something, but boy is he wrong. She's just a mistress, scheming to stick around the house until she can make an affair official through marriage. You gotta do what you can now, for any unforeseen circumstances in the future. After all, it never hurts to have a few aces up your sleeve. Mumbling these thoughts to myself, I start checking social media. A friend suggestion pops up. I tap on an icon that seems to be Jennifer's face. Her photo is heavily edited, the shape of her face and the size of her eyes are completely different, but it's unmistakably Jennifer. Browsing through Jennifer's page, I see photos and posts that lead me to an unpleasant truth. You've gotta be kidding me. Most of Jennifer's photos are those hint photos, suggesting she's in a relationship. But what caught my eye was a man's belongings in the background, something familiar. These hint photos didn't show the man's face, but I'm pretty sure it's the husband of a close friend from high school. She was such a good friend that I even gave a speech at her wedding. Plus, I visited her house multiple times when she was single, so I know. He always had a unique taste in belongings and style. I remembered thinking he had a flair for things with uniqueness, so I'm certain about it. One of the items in the photo is a shark bone keychain, identical to the one my friend said she and her husband both have. There's also a uniquely colored wallet and a tie with a distinct pattern. Anyone who knows him would instantly recognize those. I wonder if my high school friend knows about this. No, she's probably living her life unaware of it. I was torn, but decided my friend probably doesn't know. Whether to confront him about the affair or not, I'd leave up to her, but I decided to let her know about the social media account. And there's one more person I need to get in touch with. It's been a while, mother-in-law. You're coming over the day after tomorrow to live with us, right? I heard from Jake, but before that, there's something I'd like to discuss.
Oh, what a coincidence. I'm gonna be staying with you from the day after tomorrow, and I had something I wanted to talk to you about too.
Given that the mother-in-law also wants to talk, this seems like a good time. I might as well lay it all out now.
I'm gonna be blunt. I'm thinking of divorcing Jake, and the reason is that he's been cheating. I'm still at the house now, but once I pack up, I plan to leave.
I had a hunch something was up. Jake suddenly started talking about being a good son, and I knew something was off. So, where's the proof? It makes sense for her to ask for proof. If her own son was cheating and that led to a potential divorce, of course she'd want to see evidence.
Here it is. We share a computer, and I found these emails and photos. I think they make it clear. Is this all you've got?
The way she flips through the printed out emails hurts. Her gaze feels heavy.
This is all for now. I really wanted more conclusive evidence before confronting Jake, but I don't have anything else yet.
Well, considering it's him, I'd expect him to try and make excuses or lie. Here, take this and hire a detective or whoever you need. She slowly took something out of her purse, a bank book and a debit card.
But this money.
It's part of my late husband's inheritance. He cheated on me when we were younger, and I just can't stand infidelity. This seems like the perfect opportunity to teach him a lesson. As she said this, she smirked. I'd only spoken to her once or twice before. To be honest, I found her a bit intimidating, so I never imagined she'd be this supportive. Use this money to settle things properly. I've always appreciated that you, Linda, married my good-for-nothing son. I want you to lean on me. With the money the mother-in-law provided, I hired a detective known for his skills in catching cheaters. I got indisputable evidence. Now, I just need to find the right moment to confront Jake. It's been 2 weeks since my mother-in-law and Jennifer started living together. I was almost ready to leave the house. On a day off from work, for both Jake and me, a letter addressed to Jennifer got forwarded to our house, and it turned out to be a ticking time bomb.
What? The boyfriend wants to break up?
You were just talking about getting married or something, weren't you? What the heck did you do?
It's from his wife. She is saying they are not going to divorce and he will dump me instead.
Suddenly, Jake grabbed the papers Jennifer was holding.
What's this? The sender's name is a woman. This can't be real. It's gotta be some kind of prank.
For some reason, Jake seemed to think Jennifer wasn't entirely at fault. On the other hand, my mother-in-law looked as though she had no idea what was going on.
Jennifer often talked about her beloved boyfriend. That guy? He's my best friend's husband. She got pregnant, and he said he'd divorce his wife and marry Jennifer? Did you really think he would do that? Wait, so that was a lie? Come on, you tried to break up someone's family.
Jennifer, on the verge of tears, defended herself.
He always said he and his wife were at odds and could get divorced any day. He told me he wanted to raise a child together if we had one and that he wanted a child with me.
They were already on the rocks. So, it ain't cheating or having an affair. Jennifer's always been an easy target for jealousy and grudges. Feeling the urgency, I confronted Jake.
So, are you saying infidelity and affairs aren't a big deal?
Well, it's just men being men, right? Why overreact for every little thing? You should just let it go. I laid out the pictures a detective took on the table.
This picture clearly shows you, Jake. The report says you're cheating with a woman named Janet, a client. Stop playing games.
Jake seems to think I'm not really mad and is still laughing it off. I told you, it's just men being men. If you can't handle it, how are you gonna survive in this world? That's it. The decision to divorce still stands. Naturally, I'll start filling for our assets to be divided. Hey, wait a minute. You can't be serious. What's this division thing? Cool your head. From the side, the mother-in-law's angry voice cut in.
Both Jake and Jennifer are hopeless. I never thought my own son could be like this. I'm so disappointed. Wait, it's not my fault, Mom. The boyfriend lied to me. I'm a victim. What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Enough of your ridiculous excuses.
Next to the arguing mother-in-law and Jennifer, Jake, realizing the gravity of his actions, asked me, "You're not serious about the divorce and property division, are you? You still love me, right?
What are you talking about? Cheating, making decisions on your own, you're the worst. Remember when you, all by yourself, decided that living with your mother and Jennifer was the only option, and if I didn't accept it, we'd divorce?
Who are you to say that?" Unbelievably, upon hearing my words, Jake began to sob.
It was fate that Janet and I met. It was pure love. Our relationship is different from ours. You understand, right? You'd support my pure love, wouldn't you?
I couldn't, and didn't want to, understand a word he said from start to finish.
Anyway, I've packed my things, and I'm leaving. Are you really leaving? How am I gonna live without you?
Looking down at Jake pathetically clinging to my feet, I delivered my final words.
Not my problem. Expect the divorce process to begin soon.
Deal with it. In the end, with the involvement of a lawyer, I smoothly got divorced with Jake and filed so our assets to be divided equitably. Although my ex-mother-in-law had lost her husband earlier, she's in good health and has started living on her own for the first time. I got a message from her saying that she's really enjoying her new life, diving into hobbies and other activities. Rumors have it that Jennifer got pregnant from an affair. You can't keep a secret for long, so it was bound to come out. In the end, she got fired from the agency she worked for. The rumors of her affair spread, and she became labeled as trouble everywhere, making it difficult for her to find employment. Moreover, Jennifer's affair partner chose to reconcile with his wife and child, essentially my best friend, leaving Jennifer behind. One day, Jennifer found out where I was and aggressively confronted me.
You told his wife about us, didn't you? Were your well wishes for my happiness a lie?
I never said I wished for your happiness. I can't forgive anyone for having an affair, especially since she's my best friend. I can't stand by and watch my best friend suffer. That's all.
You're the one who's meddling.
Jennifer tried to grab me, but luckily we were in a crowded mall, and a young security guard intervened, preventing any harm. By the way, both of them seem to be trying to lean on my ex-mother-in-law in various ways, but she seems to be rejecting them. Jake got dumped by the woman he was cheating with and, under the stress, got hooked on slot machines. He was avoiding to comply with paying me the property settlement, so I had to request court to enforce the divorce settlement. Rumors of our divorce and his non-compliance spread throughout Jake's workplace. His workplace took the situation very seriously. Even though Jake was performing well, he got demoted to a do-nothing department because of his behavior. In this new department, which is often referred to as a sidelined room, he reportedly has nothing to do all day and is just dead weight to the company. I've successfully divorced Jake and now thoroughly enjoying my single life. I once dreamed of having a child with the man I loved, but that's all in the past now. I need to make sure I earn well. Plus, who I'm dating with the intention of marrying. Our lives, both personal and professional, are fulfilling. He's a male nurse hired midway through his career, very gentle-spoken, and it's really relaxing to talk to him. He's an amazing man who wants to spend his life with me, even if it means not having children. I want to decide my own happiness as I move forward in life. A mom friend who always finds a reason not to pay for meals. She invites me to go out and then leaves without paying, as if it's natural. I had become the one who always pays. One day, she invited me to a hotel and said, "Pay $1,500. I was confused and asked, "What are you talking about?" And she demanded that I pay for our share of the lodging. She was saying something so unreasonable. I'm still in shock, but I'm going to give her a dose of reality. I am Michelle, a 45-year-old office worker. I live with my husband of 18 years, our middle school daughter, and elementary school son. Since both my husband and I work, we share household chores. Whoever has free hands does the dishes, and we cooperate to manage our daily lives. My husband actively takes care of our kids, driving our daughter to her sports activities, playing catch with our son. He's a great father. I'm happy to spend time with such a considerate husband and cute children. Then one day, a person who shattered my peaceful daily life appeared.
Michelle, wanna go out for coffee sometime?
One morning, while I was taking out the trash, the one who spoke to me was my neighbor and fellow mom, Susan.
Good morning, coffee, you say?
I asked back, and she replied.
There's a cafe that opened nearby that sells delicious bread. I thought we might go together.
Apparently, a trendy cafe that sells popular Korean bread had opened nearby.
Oh, I see.
I said non-committally, but Susan was thinking to herself.
Oh, Michelle, you have work, right? Yeah.
And seemed to be considering something. Susan, a mom of my daughter's classmate, hadn't talked much before, but we'd had some interaction lately.
Let's go on Saturday. Yes, that'll be good.
Susan was excited, but I wasn't enthusiastic. To be honest, between work, housework, and childcare on weekdays, I want my 2 days off for family time. As I was thinking of refusing, Susan said.
On Saturday, your daughter has sports, and your son said he has plans with friends, so there's no problem, right?
I was surprised that Susan knew my children's schedules, and asked.
How do you know that?
She cheerfully responded.
I heard from David, who's in the same sports activities, that there's practice, and your son said he's going out to play.
It became hard to refuse Susan, who was in such a good mood.
So, Saturday it is.
She left after stating the date and meeting place, and I had committed to going to the cafe. Then Saturday came, and I was feeling down after working overtime. We were supposed to meet at the station, but Susan was nowhere to be seen even 10 minutes later.
Michelle!
I saw Susan waving from a distance, looking cheerful.
Oh, it's a bit chilly today,
she said, without apologizing for being late, and talked all the way from the station to the cafe. When we arrived at the cafe, there was a surprisingly long line, even though it had only been open for an hour.
Oh my, lots of young people.
Most of the other customers were young people. I suggested going to another store because of the long wait, but Susan stubbornly refused, saying,
No, I want to eat this bread.
We waited in line for an hour. Finally seated, guided by the staff.
Phew, I'm tired. Michelle, you should have gotten the drinks ready,
Susan said. Holding back my frustration, I smiled and apologized.
Sorry for not being thoughtful.
The bread at the cafe Susan had strongly recommended was indeed delicious, and I felt very satisfied. I thought about coming with my family next time. As we were about to leave, Susan said,
Excuse me, I need to go to the restroom,
and headed to the toilet. After waiting 5 more minutes, feeling the stares of people in the waiting line, I paid the bill. Another 10 minutes outside, Susan came out of the shop, saying,
Sorry to keep you waiting. My stomach hurt a little.
I asked about her condition, and she said,
I'm fine now.
Walking ahead of me. As I tried to speak, Susan cut me off and asked,
Hey, are you thirsty or something? What do you want? Come on, pick something.
Even when I declined, she insisted.
Come on. Push the button, hurry.
I was almost forcibly told to choose, and so I picked some tea.
It's on me, enjoy your drink,
she said, so I thanked her, and Susan was smug about it. Could it be that she thinks this will cover the cost of the coffee and the bread? I don't feel comfortable explicitly saying, Please pay. Normally, wouldn't you ask the person how much it was? Feeling a bit uneasy, we arrived at the station before I knew it. Susan quickly went home, saying she had something to do. Since then, every time I was invited for tea, Susan would ditch the bill. Not only that, but she seems to be inquiring about my family's activities from other people. Meanwhile, she leaves her kids with her in-laws on Saturdays and Sundays and goes out with friends, hardly ever being at home. Lately, she has even been leaving her kids with us to go out drinking on weekday nights. She had been checking when we would be home to drop off her child. Bringing the child before dinner, she said.
Oh, is it dinner time? Well then, please take care of my child too.
The child was happy to eat with us, saying it felt like siblings, but it wouldn't be the same for the adults.
Is your husband not home?
I asked, to which she replied.
He is on a business trip a lot, so he's not here right now. Take care, okay?
It seems her husband is away a lot for work.
Hold on, at least pay for the food, please.
Honestly, with 2 growing children, the cost of food can be quite a burden.
It doesn't make much difference with just 2 more.
Susan said, leaving, but any homemaker should understand. A month has already passed since we started living this way, and the kids are on summer vacation.
On the way home, Susan from the neighborhood invited us to go out with our families. What should we do?
On his way home from work, my husband had been approached by Susan. Since Susan's husband would be home, she invited us to go out during the holiday.
If it's with the family, it's probably fine. If her husband is there, it shouldn't be a problem, right?
I thought, with some apprehension.
I don't know. But the kids seem to be on board.
It seems he had already mentioned it to the children, and it was set between them and Susan.
It depends on you and my schedule,
he said. I was so dumbfounded by Susan's strong-arm tactics that I couldn't say anything. If the kids are looking forward to it, we have no choice. I contacted Susan, and we decided on the time and place while discussing the details, and the day finally arrived.
Hey, where's your husband?
Her husband, who was supposed to be there, was nowhere to be found.
Unfortunately, he had to go on a sudden business trip.
It seems Susan's husband won't be able to join, and it'll just be her and her 2 children.
Then I'll follow behind.
We drove separately to the destination. We arrived at a rental campground with fully equipped facilities, including cottages, and we were going to stay overnight and return the next day. While we were preparing the barbecue, the kids were already playing. Once everything was ready, we started grilling the meat. We had reserved food for 10, which was 2 extra servings. Since Susan's husband wasn't there, we had 3 extra servings, and I was worried that we might have too much.
Breakfast is always the kids' favorite, but during the summer break, thinking of the menu for lunch and dinner is such a hassle, isn't it?
We were just having a casual conversation, while Susan just sat there.
That's why, today we're just grilling meat. Easy peasy.
My husband and I are busy preparing the barbecue and frantically grilling meat, while Susan just sits there, doing nothing, with a cool expression on her face.
We have to watch the kids properly, after all.
She says this but only watches the children from afar. When I call the children to eat the grilled meat, she reaches out and takes it, saying,
"Wow, that looks delicious."
Oh. My children and I all wear surprised expressions, and Susan suddenly realizes.
Oh, is this for the children? I was thinking of giving it to the children first, but it's fine since we're grilling more.
The children look disappointed, and I thought Susan would apologize, but she just laughs and says,
"You better eat quickly, or I'll eat it all up."
My husband and the kids are utterly taken aback by this. And then there's Susan, eating even more meat than the growing children. We had planned 1 lamb chop per person, but she has already had 4 and is reaching for more.
"Susan, you've reserved only 1 lamb chop per person. You've already eaten 2 extra ones for yourself and your husband, so please eat something else."
It might seem like a trivial matter, but there's no substitute food because it's by reservation.
What? There are restrictions on what I can eat. That's stingy,
she said, to which I replied.
Didn't you check when you made the reservation?
She should have known exactly what and how much was available since we decided on it together. When we were planning, and we talked about ordering more because we have growing children, she said.
I don't eat much, I have a small appetite. Just think of me as not there, and 1 extra portion should be fine.
With my children who eat well and the men around, I thought it would be safe to order for 10 people. We had 2 middle school children who could eat 2 portions each, and one elementary school child who could eat 2 portions, so there shouldn't have been any problem with the amount. But the meat was disappearing quickly.
Mom, I want to eat that meat,
my son said, reaching for the meat he wanted, only to have Susan snatch it and eat it quickly. I was angry, but my usually mild-mannered husband was starting to show his irritation as well. The reason we couldn't strongly object was that Susan's children were also there.
Mom, don't act like a child,
said Susan's daughter.
What are you talking about? Camping is all about survival, and survival means fighting over meat.
The children seemed dumbfounded by Susan's childish behavior. Afterward, we finished the barbecue, played outside for a while, and then decided to take a break. The cottages were separate, so we could get away from Susan and catch our breath.
It was supposed to be fun, but it's just so tense.
My husband looked tired.
Yeah, let's eat breakfast and head home early tomorrow.
We spent the rest of the time relaxing with the family and greeted the morning.
Good morning.
Susan came out of her cottage cheerfully.
Good morning.
You're lively this morning, I replied, and she said,
Of course. I ate a lot and relaxed, and had a great time.
For breakfast, we ate the provided sandwiches, played a little more, and then started preparing to leave. During the final payment, Susan was nowhere to be found.
Susan's not here,
I told my husband, and we looked around, but Susan's children were also missing.
Hey, where's Susan and her kids?
I asked the children if they had seen her.
They said they were going to the restroom.
Apparently, Susan told her daughter she was going to the restroom, and told the children to go to the restroom before leaving.
How would you like to handle the payment?
Asked the cashier.
Please wait a little longer,
I replied, and after waiting 10 more minutes, Susan still hadn't returned.
Isn't this taking too long?
I went to check the restroom. But Susan and her children were nowhere to be found, and her car, which was supposed to be parked next door, was gone too.
What?
My husband also looked surprised. It seemed that Susan and her family had already left. I couldn't believe it. I was on the verge of exploding with anger. To invite us and then run away without paying, it was enough to drive me insane. The total cost of the camping equipment, cottage accommodation, drinks, meat, and everything else came close to $900. Susan had confirmed the approximate amount at the time of reservation, and she had been the one who chose the place. She had rejected all the places I suggested and insisted that this particular place was perfect. Choosing a location that only allowed on-site payment seems like a premeditated act now. We decided to head straight to Susan's house.
Susan, please open up.
After ringing the doorbell several times, Susan reluctantly opened the door.
Susan, why did you leave without saying anything?
I questioned.
Huh? Didn't I say I was leaving?
She pretended not to know.
Susan, you have to pay on the spot.
Hand over the money, I told her a bit forcefully.
Oh, I forgot. But I don't have any money right now,
Susan replied.
We confirmed the amount in advance, didn't we?
You were the one who set the budget, Susan. I hadn't mentioned it before, but I couldn't keep quiet any longer. But she kept saying she had no money, so I asked what was going on.
I bought something I wanted before the camping trip. Look,
she said, laughing and showing off what she had bought.
So you didn't have any money during the camping trip?
I asked, getting a bit irritated but continuing to question.
Yeah, I didn't have it when I reserved, so what?
I was fed up with Susan, who kept laughing without feeling sorry at all.
You planned this from the beginning,
I said, and she replied.
Well, thanks to me inviting you, we had a great time. It's a win-win situation, isn't it?
So I confirmed one last time.
So you have no intention of paying? You're so persistent, it's embarrassing. I told you I don't have the money. When I get it, I'll pay you back. Or are you trying to squeeze money out of someone who doesn't have any?
With no shame and an unapologetic attitude, Susan laughed, and I reached my breaking point.
I see, understood.
I went home without saying anything more and discussed the situation with my husband. Time passed, and Susan suggested,
Michelle, a tasty restaurant opened nearby. Let's go.
She acted as if the past incident never happened. I'm sorry, I'm busy, so I'll have to pass. I had been turning down Susan's invitations for the past few months. Losing patience, Susan approached me with an angry look.
Hey, are you avoiding me? You're still holding a grudge over the camping thing? A few hundred or a few $1,000s, so what? I can't believe you'd avoid someone over that, even if it were several tens of thousands.
Susan ranted, infuriated and talking fast. Is that so? Susan, let's go to an inn next time. I suggested a trip to Susan.
Huh? Oh, sure, you planned it? In that case, I'll have to coordinate with my family.
Susan became cheerful. I told her my husband had given me some alone time and was thinking of going on a 2-night trip. When asked if my husband would mind taking care of the kids, I declined, saying he was busy. To the hesitant Susan, I said, I plan to stay for 2 nights from Friday. If it's difficult, I'll go alone. To which she replied,
Wait, in that case, I'll leave them with my in-laws.
Susan said she would leave them with her husband's parents and go on the trip. When I showed her the exterior of the inn, Susan became even more delighted. I'll book 2 rooms. There seems to be a spa and all. I told her about the inn, and Susan started to look up various things on her own.
How about I invite my friends too?
She said, so I told her I'd make the reservations all at once. A month later, the day of the inn reservation arrived. Susan and her friends were at my house, looking puzzled at me.
Aren't you going to drive us?
Sorry. I have to stop by my in-laws, so let's go separately, I said, and Susan reluctantly agreed, and we headed to the inn in different cars.
Wow, I can't believe we're staying at such a lovely inn. Michelle, thank you.
Everyone was amazed at the magnificence of the inn. Let's enjoy our free time then. Susan and her friends were having a great time, seemingly forgetting about me. The first day was just eating, bathing, and sleeping. After the bath, I ran into Susan and her friends having a huddled conversation. Hey, Susan. Are you sure about staying at such an expensive inn? Can you afford it? One of Susan's friends asked.
Yes, it's all on me.
Susan boasted.
Amazing. It's over $1,000 per person per night. So generous. In that case, I'll turn off notifications for texts and calls, and spend time in this dream world until we leave the hotel.
Susan said she would pay for 5 friends lodging in full, and everyone was getting excited. The morning of the second day, they went to the spa for massages, and were able to spend a meaningful time healing their everyday fatigue. I tried texting Susan, but she didn't read it or reply even by night. It seemed she was having a good time.
Hello, Michelle, it's morning already.
Cheerful Susan called. Yes, that's right. I replied, wondering why I was stating the obvious.
You overslept, so it's your fault, right? We're going home first, so pay $15,000.
Susan said something utterly unexpected. Huh? Oversleep? $15,000? What are you talking about? I didn't understand what she meant.
The last one always pays, right?
Susan said, so I replied. Yeah. I'm already home, though. Didn't you see my text? I had told Susan I was going home through text.
Oh, I wouldn't be looking at my phone in such a fabulous, unreal place.
I explained the situation to Susan. I went home on the second night. My mother-in-law seems to be feeling unwell, so I came to my parents' house early. Originally, I was only going to pick up the children and husband who were out playing, but as my mother-in-law wasn't feeling well, I decided to leave early.
Why didn't you say something?
Susan was angry. I told her that my husband contacted me late, so I texted her, and she asked.
What? What about the bill?
Thinking she was mad about me going home without paying my share, I said. Don't worry, I've already paid.
Oh, right, that's fine then. We just have to return the keys at the front desk and go home.
Susan said, her tone returning to calm. Well, yes. Since it's on-site payment, please stop by the front desk. My part has been properly deducted. If the front desk handled everything properly, there shouldn't be a problem, I explained.
You did pay, right?
Susan asked again. Yes, I paid my part before I left, so it's okay. I replied. However, Susan's next words made me uneasy.
What about our part?
With this question, I was sure that Susan intended to make me pay. Please pay for yourselves. I heard after the bath that Susan, you were going to pay for your friends, right?
Well, that's...
Susan stammered. You're amazing. Honestly, I thought you were the worst kind of person for always disappearing when it's time to pay. So you really were going to pay back the money for the camp later. I misunderstood you, Susan, I'm sorry. I joked, building her up.
Wait a minute.
I cut off Susan's protest and said, tell me all about your wonderful time when you get back. See you later. And I hung up the phone. When I got home, my worried husband asked, are you okay? But I smiled and said, yeah, I'm fine. Susan and the others seemed to have a great time. Later, Susan, who had invited her friends by saying,
I'll pay,
somehow managed to pay using multiple credit cards. When Susan returned, her complexion was very bad, unlike the last person she had met at the inn.
I never intended to pay,
she screamed as she went home. According to what the children heard from Susan's children, her husband, who had returned from a business trip, scolded her terribly.
You have to earn and pay that large amount of $15,000 yourself,
he said, and she seemed to have started working part-time. For Susan, who had been leading a sloppy life, leaving housework and childcare to others, it must be a very tough time. She seems to be working so hard that she has no time to rest, both physically and mentally. I no longer get invitations to play from Susan, nor do I have to look after her children, and I've been able to regain a peaceful daily life. On holidays, I can spend time leisurely with my family, and I'm very happy.